Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to paint a beautiful Aurora Bear. I start by wetting my sky area with clear brush, trying not to get too close to the outline because I need to keep the shape of my animal nice and clean. I apply a liberal amount of water all the way to the border with the mountain. In this case, the paint won't drip down. Please make sure that the surface is evenly wet and there are no puddles. Then I take my wet brush and get some yellow and run my stroke across the sky imitating the northern lights. The northern lights can be very different, so you can look up reference images that you like and follow the shape of the lights. Here my design is pretty dramatic, so I start at the top, painting my lights diagonally like a wave. This is going to be the lightest part. Then I'm adding turquoise, going from light to dark. As I move, I add more thinner lines of turquoise, making sure that I stay within my silhouette. I'm also playing around with a few zigzag moves to mimic the shape of the northern lights. Once you apply your lightest colors, it's the time to build up the darkness. For this step, I mix in phthalo blue to my turquoise and apply it between the blue areas. I switch between thick and thin brush strokes to add variety and movement to the painting. As I fill in the color, I carefully work around my silhouette, shaping the ears and the head of my bear. Just like with turquoise, I paint my lines here diagonally like a wave, but I only have phthalo blue on my brush at this point. I'm gradually building up the top of my artwork from light to dark, and I'm also adding some fun splashes of blue to imitate the night sky. For the deepest accents, I'm adding mix of violet and phthalo blue. My hand movements here not only follow the direction of aurora lights, but also the fur of the bear. This is the most magical technique because you just let the colors flow. You only gently help the pigments combine and then watch how beautifully they dry, creating unique texture. Important note is that you can still add more color in detail while the paper is still wet. When it's dry, it will be impossible to fix, but you're still able to add more later with extra layers. When the surface is still damp, you can sprinkle some salt and see how it affects the paint around. This will help to create a very interesting starry sky. At the end, with almost dry brush, I'm adding very bright yellow accents to create a beautiful contrast. Next, we move to painting a mountain and a background of our forest. My paper is dry here, and with a mix of turquoise and phthalo blue, I paint the base. Then I used blue and violet for the shade. I'm moving down, creating rocky sides and points. As I go, I'm adding darker tones of color with Payne's gray that will create a beautiful granulating effect. Then we move to painting a base of our forest. For this, I'm using my darker mix of blue and violet with some Payne's gray here and there to create a contrast. Don't worry that part of the forest blends with the mountain. This will actually help us to create a three-dimensional view. You can see how I switch from almost flat brush movement to fill in the area to a pointy precise strokes to create tree tops and paint the hair of my bear. My sky is not fully dry yet, and I start painting the trees very lightly with almost dry brush, mostly to define them. While my mountain is still damp in some areas, I can add more details to it and separate it from the sky with darker accents. I'm using a mix of violet and phthalo blue here, and with the point of my brush I mark my top and go down from there. If your sky turned out very dark behind the mountain, I would leave it as is on that side and only add some contrasting details on the lighter side. When you're adding more details to your mountain, please make sure that you don't paint it too dark, because we still need to paint an even darker forest on the top layer. With the very tip of my brush, I add small lines and dots, and with the side of it, I fill in bigger areas. When I'm satisfied with the details on my mountain, I move to the trees. Look how beautifully it's all dried up. Before we start our trees, we need to make sure that the paper on top is dry. Otherwise, our tree tops will blend with the northern lights. If your surface is still slightly wet, you can wait a bit to let it dry or use a hair dryer to speed up the process. For trees, I mix a dark wash of violet and phthalo blue with a bit of Payne's gray. I start with the tallest tree, painting it with the very tip of my brush in uneven, short brush strokes. In nature, trees are not symmetrical, so please don't think too much about painting a perfect one, but rather let yourself and your hand to create some magic. If you need some references for the pine trees, look up some images. When I move down the tree, I press on the brush harder, and you can see that my strokes are becoming larger as well. Painting more and more branches, I make sure that they also imitate the furs of my bear. It's crucial while painting my double exposure artwork to always remember that it's a portrait first, and with the landscape inside, I just add more meaning to my art. I continue to paint trees with a slightly different mix of my blue, violet and Payne's gray. There is a part of a mountain background that is still not dry, and I let some of my trees to blend with it. This is actually helping us to create a deeper perspective. I'm trying to create a circle composition of my forest because the bear is looking straight at us. And to balance one side, we need to paint another tall tree on the other side. It's better when they are all different sizes and levels. So my tree on the left is the tallest one, then I'm going to paint the eyes a bit lower. Then we have the tree on the right, and then the top of the mountain. This way we will have a very fresh and organic feel to our artwork. Again, I'm starting from the top, using the very tip of my brush, and as I move down the tree, I press on my brush harder. While I paint the trees, I like to add colors straight from my palette so they would blend nicely on the paper by themselves. I want to have a little hill on the right side, so I'm not painting the trees there all the way down the paper, but rather focusing on fur and hair lines. I add a stroke with clear water to blend my trees with the hill. Then I continue painting smaller trees. I mix a lighter, more bluish wash for the trees on the back, and with that, I'm creating an effect of a deep forest. You can notice that every tree is different. I try not to think about the precise strokes and branches and just keep the shape of the pine tree in my mind while doing that. Notice how I hold my brush. If I need more control over my brush and movement, I hold it close to the bristles. When I need more loose and free strokes, I move up the handle. Most of my painted layers are dry now, and I start adding more details and fur. First, with the lighter tones of blue and Payne's gray mix, I'm going over the top of the head, adding volume to the ears. I never just simply outline my portraits, which would create a childish or cartoonish look. I need to retouch one of the trees on the left. Previously, that area was still pretty wet, so the tree just blended with the mountain. I'm adding some more color to it using a mix of violet and blue. Then I'm using the same wash for a few more hairlines. Now it's time to paint face features. Using a mix of phthalo blue with violet, I'm starting with the eyes. Then I move to the muzzle with the same color and switch to a turquoise wash because I don't want the nose and mouth to be that vivid. I'm adding more turquoise blue to the eyes and also painting tiny details around the eye, like eyelashes, eyelid lines, tear duct, and hairs. Then I'm using the same turquoise color around the nose and mouth, adding more hair and detail there as well. Try not to get too dark here unless you do want to bring the muzzle up close. Having a real bear face reference image would help a lot to feel more comfortable painting at this stage. A nice way to blend in some strokes with the background is to use a slightly wet brush with clear water. This helps me to soften the lines a bit, too distinct for my taste. Then, using Payne's Gray, I go back to the eyes and add some more detail. Here you can probably guess that I'm painting a girl bear, giving her long eyelashes and overall a very soft expression. Using turquoise, I'm adding bigger strokes of hair on top to balance the overall look. Then I mix in some blue and move to the ears. At this stage, my brush doesn't have much water in it, which helps me to paint straight, solid lines. I gradually work with small strokes all over the bear, rotating the turquoise color and the blue mix. Here I add some fun splashes in the same turquoise. For this technique, I get quite a lot of water on my brush and just go with my finger through the bristles. You can also tap the brush with color on the other brush, but that seems to create more out-of-hand splashes that you can't control. I do it again with a dark mix of blue at the bottom. By now everything is dry and I'm adding darker details to my front trees. Here I'm using my darkest mix of blue, violet and Payne's Gray, which looks almost black but is still full of color. Again, I go from top using the very tip of my brush, down making my strokes larger. I don't try to cover each of my branches that I painted before, I just add smaller strokes and pines. I do the same on the front tree on the right side and then move to the left one close to the center. If you count our layers and we used the most for our forest, we still did it with 3 layers. Background, sky and mountains, main layer for the trees, and now the final third one for details. They say for the best result on watercolor, you should keep it under 4 layers. In that case, you can almost feel the air in the artwork. It's light and looks very effortless, which is our main goal. We are almost at the very end. With a grayish mix, I'm adding more darkness and details to the nose and muzzle area. And then I'm using the same wash for my fur lines around the face and the eyebrows. With darker tone and almost dry brush, I go over my silhouette once again. These are our very final touches. Paint these strokes slightly and try not to overcrowd the face. If you have plain dark areas in your sky, you can also sprinkle some white here or use the very tip of your brush to paint stars. And that's it! Our beautiful Aurora Bear is done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and have fun creating your own Aurora Bear.